I've always considered myself a bit of a late bloomer. The idea of entrepreneurship had always intrigued me, but I never had the courage to dive in. My life, until that point, had been fairly predictable. I graduated from college with a degree in marketing, worked in a corporate job, and lived a comfortable life. But deep down, something was always missing. It wasn't until I was 28 that I realized I had been following a path that wasn't truly my own. I'd fallen into the routine of waking up, going to work, and coming home to do it all over again the next day. I'd often daydream about the possibility of owning a business, but the thought of failure was paralyzing. I feared that stepping out of my comfort zone would result in disaster, and I didn't want to risk everything I had built for something so uncertain. But one evening, as I was scrolling through Reddit, I came across a thread where someone was sharing their entrepreneurial journey. They talked about the struggles, the setbacks, and the small victories that eventually led to success. I was captivated. The person wasn't some untouchable billionaire, just an average person who had taken a chance, faced challenges, and ended up creating something meaningful. That was the turning point for me. I thought, if they can do it, why can't I? I didn't waste any more time pondering it. I started researching what kind of business I could start, and it quickly became clear that e-commerce was a good fit. I had no technical background, but I knew marketing, and that felt like a good starting point. I decided to focus on a niche I was passionate about: eco-friendly products. The planet was something I cared deeply about, and I figured there must be others out there who felt the same. The first step was to come up with a product idea. I knew I wanted to sell something that people would find valuable and sustainable, but the options were overwhelming. Should I sell reusable bags, bamboo toothbrushes, or eco-friendly cleaning products? After weeks of researching trends and consumer needs, I finally decided on a line of biodegradable phone cases. They were practical, and they aligned with my passion for sustainability. Then came the next challenge: finding a supplier. I wasn't familiar with sourcing products from overseas, and I had no idea where to begin. But after a lot of trial and error, I found a manufacturer that could provide me with the materials I needed. I placed my first order, spent what little savings I had on a small batch of cases, and created a basic website. The whole process felt like a huge leap into the unknown, but I had committed to it. There was no turning back. The first few months were tough. I didn't make a single sale for the first month, and I started to wonder if I had made a huge mistake. The website traffic was low, and I felt like I was constantly throwing money into ads with no return. But I didn't give up. I kept tweaking my marketing strategy and refining my approach. I started reaching out to eco-conscious influencers on Instagram, offering them free samples in exchange for reviews. Slowly but surely, I started gaining traction. By month 3, I made my first sale. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me motivated. The excitement I felt from that single transaction pushed me to keep working harder. Over the next few months, sales gradually increased. I expanded my product line to include biodegradable screen protectors and reusable straws. I reinvested every penny I made into better marketing and improving the website. It wasn't until I hit the 1-year mark that I finally saw a consistent flow of revenue coming in. But then, just as things were starting to pick up, disaster struck. My supplier informed me that due to production delays, my orders would be delayed by several weeks. I was in a panic. My customers were getting frustrated, and I didn't have a backup plan. I spent hours researching alternative suppliers, but it seemed like I had no other viable options. The stress was unbearable. I remember one particular night, sitting at my kitchen table, trying to come up with a solution. I had just received another email from an unhappy customer, and I felt like I was on the verge of a breakdown. But then, something clicked. I realized that instead of trying to find a quick fix, I needed to be transparent with my customers. I sent out an email explaining the situation, offering discounts on future orders, and apologizing for the delays. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers appreciated my honesty, and many of them expressed their understanding. That experience taught me a valuable lesson. Transparency and communication are key, even when things go wrong. It was a turning point in my business. From that point on, I made a commitment to always be upfront with my customers, no matter what. The next few years were a whirlwind. My business continued to grow, and I eventually hired a small team to help with customer service and marketing. I started expanding into new markets, reaching customers all over the world. The money I had once feared losing was now being reinvested into scaling the business, and it was paying off. We started getting noticed by major media outlets, and even big-name brands reached out to collaborate. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. The person I was when I first started this journey feels like a completely different person. I've learned so much about resilience, adaptability, and the importance of staying true to your values. There have been plenty of challenges along the way, but I've learned to embrace them as opportunities for growth. My story isn't a fairy tale. I've had plenty of sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and setbacks. But through it all, I've learned one important thing. Entrepreneurship is about taking risks, learning from mistakes, and continuously adapting. The road to success isn't linear, and the challenges are part of the journey. If you're considering starting a business, don't let fear hold you back. Take that first step. It might not be easy, but the rewards are worth it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I started my business from the most unlikely of places, a small, rundown apartment in a city that felt like it was always under construction. It wasn't glamorous, and honestly, it wasn't even comfortable, but it was all I could afford. I had a dream, and with just a laptop, a few $100s, and an old phone, I was ready to take on the world. It wasn't like I had a grand idea right away. I didn't wake up one day and suddenly know what I wanted to do. What I had, though, was a lot of time and a sense of urgency that only someone who had nothing to lose could feel. I was broke, living paycheck to paycheck, and desperate to change my life. I was working in retail, selling shoes, and while I didn't hate the job, I felt like it wasn't the life I was meant to lead. I had been trying to start my own online business for months, dabbling in drop shipping, affiliate marketing, and even selling handmade crafts on Etsy, but nothing seemed to stick. One day, while scrolling through Reddit, I stumbled upon a post about starting a digital marketing agency. I'd heard of digital marketing, of course, but I never thought it was something I could do. I had zero experience in marketing, no formal education, and no clue how to even begin. But the more I read, the more it made sense. The barrier to entry seemed low, just a computer, internet access, and some knowledge, and the potential to scale quickly was enormous. I thought, why not? What's the worst that could happen? I decided to dive in head first. I started watching free tutorials on YouTube, reading blog posts, and following every free webinar I could find. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited. I wasn't just watching Netflix in my spare time. I was learning, researching, and building something. I remember telling myself, I'll figure it out as I go along. And that's exactly what I did. I learned about SEO, Facebook ads, Google ads, email marketing, and how to build websites. I didn't know everything, but I knew enough to start reaching out to small businesses and offering them my services. At first, I made tons of mistakes. My emails were poorly written, my proposals were underpriced, and I couldn't even properly explain what I did. But with each rejection, I learned something new. I refined my pitch, improved my skills, and slowly began getting responses. The first breakthrough came when a local coffee shop owner responded to one of my cold emails. She needed help getting more foot traffic to her shop, and after a brief call, she agreed to let me help with a social media campaign. I didn't have much to offer in terms of experience, but I was hungry to prove myself. I worked tirelessly on her campaign, tweaking ads, writing posts, and learning everything I could about her target audience. The results were better than I expected. Within a month, the shop saw a 25% increase in foot traffic, and the owner was thrilled. She referred me to another local business owner, and suddenly I had a second client. From there, things started to snowball. Word of mouth helped me land more clients, and I began building a portfolio. My income wasn't impressive at first, but it was enough to pay the bills and slowly get me out of the hole I had been in. I invested every cent I earned back into the business, buying courses, hiring freelancers to handle tasks I couldn't do, and even upgrading my equipment. But the real turning point came when I made my first 6 figures. It didn't happen overnight, but it was the result of a shift in mindset. I stopped thinking like someone who was just trying to make ends meet and started thinking like a business owner. I began scaling by offering packages instead of hourly rates, hiring a small team to help with operations, and focusing on delivering results for my clients, not just taking on as many clients as possible. With more resources at my disposal, I was able to experiment with paid advertising and scale my client acquisition efforts. I set up systems that allowed me to manage multiple clients at once without burning out, and I hired specialists in areas like SEO and content writing to expand our service offerings. As we grew, I started investing in myself, attending networking events, and speaking at conferences. I was building a reputation as someone who not only understood marketing, but could actually get results. It wasn't always easy, though. I faced a lot of obstacles. There were moments when I doubted myself, when clients didn't pay on time, or when I felt overwhelmed by the constant hustle. I remember one client who tried to rip me off by refusing to pay after I had delivered everything as promised. I spent hours arguing with them, but in the end, I had to let it go. I realized that in business, not every battle was worth fighting, and sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and focus on the bigger picture. The hardest part was realizing that not everyone who starts a business has to succeed. I saw friends who had great ideas, but just couldn't get them off the ground. Some of them were too afraid to take risks, and others just didn't have the patience to push through the early failures. But I kept going. I had one goal in mind: to build something that would give me the freedom to live life on my own terms. Fast forward to today, and my agency is now a six-figure business. We've worked with clients from around the world, from small startups to well-established companies, and I've expanded into offering consulting services for people looking to break into the digital marketing space. I've hired a team of amazing people who share my vision, and together, we continue to grow. It hasn't been a smooth ride, and I'm still learning every day. But looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. I think about that small apartment and the days when I was scraping together just enough to get by. If you had told me back then that I would be where I am today, I wouldn't have believed you. But now, I realize that the key to my success wasn't in having all the answers. It was in taking action, learning from my mistakes, and refusing to quit. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's this: success doesn't happen by chance. It happens when you take risks, put in the work, and keep going when everyone else gives up. This is a story about how I went from a broke college student with a crazy idea to a successful entrepreneur with a thriving business. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but in the end, it all worked out in ways I couldn't have predicted. It all started when I was in my sophomore year of college. I was studying business administration, and honestly, I wasn't sure if it was the right field for me. I had big dreams of starting my own company, but I didn't have the resources, nor did I feel like I was learning anything groundbreaking in class. The thing is, I had this one idea that kept bugging me, and I couldn't shake it off. I was living in a small apartment with 3 other roommates. Money was tight. We were all struggling to make ends meet. One night, after a long day of classes and part-time work, I was scrolling through Instagram and saw an influencer promote a product. It wasn't anything new, just some random gadget. But what struck me was how much engagement the post got. It had thousands of likes and hundreds of comments asking for links. That moment hit me like a ton of bricks. I thought, why are people so eager to buy random things off the internet? And what if I could capitalize on this? I didn't have much money to start with, but I had access to the internet and a decent network of contacts. So I came up with an idea to create a small online store that sold affordable gadgets and accessories. I knew I couldn't afford to build my own website or develop complex software, so I used Shopify to set up an online store. It took me about a week to put everything together. The first challenge was sourcing products. I didn't have connections with manufacturers, so I turned to dropshipping, where I could sell products without having to hold inventory. The margins were low, but it was a start. At first, things didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped. I spent hours researching products, taking photos, writing descriptions, and figuring out how to market my tiny store. I had no idea what I was doing. The first month, I made 0 sales, but I wasn't ready to quit. I figured I had nothing to lose and everything to gain. I spent countless nights reading articles, watching YouTube tutorials, and experimenting with different marketing strategies. I started running Facebook ads targeting people who followed similar influencers and brands. I also engaged with potential customers on Instagram, offering discounts and creating content around the products I was selling. Slowly but surely, the sales started trickling in. It wasn't fast. It wasn't glamorous. But it was a start. And it was proof that my idea had potential. The next few months were a blur. I had to balance running my store with studying for exams and working part-time jobs. My days consisted of back-to-back Zoom calls, late-night study sessions, and constantly checking my online store's analytics. I was barely sleeping, but the adrenaline kept me going. After 6 months, my business was still small, but it was growing. I had a steady stream of sales, and I managed to cover my basic expenses. But I wanted more. I knew I had to take it to the next level if I wanted this to become something bigger than just a side hustle. That's when I took a big risk. I invested almost all of the money I had made into creating my own product. I wanted to stand out from the competition and offer something unique. I sourced a product that I thought had the potential to go viral, a phone accessory that solved a common problem. It was a risky move because I had no guarantee that people would buy it, but I was desperate to differentiate myself. The product launch was nerve-wracking. I spent weeks crafting a marketing campaign, building anticipation on social media, and reaching out to influencers. I also worked with a graphic designer to create a logo and packaging that looked professional. On the day of the launch, I held my breath. At first, nothing happened. The first few hours were painfully quiet. I was about to give up when a single influencer posted about my product. That post went viral. Sales flooded in within minutes, and I watched my Shopify store's dashboard explode with notifications. By the end of the day, I had sold out of my initial stock. I couldn't believe it. I had taken a huge risk, and it had paid off. That was the turning point in my business. From that day on, things changed. I was able to reinvest the profits into new products, improving the website, and scaling up my marketing. However, the journey wasn't without its struggles. There were plenty of setbacks along the way. I had to deal with fulfillment issues, supply chain problems, and competition that was constantly trying to copy my products. But each time I faced a challenge, I learned something valuable. I refined my systems, hired a small team to help, and streamlined my operations. The most important lesson I learned was that entrepreneurship is not just about having a great idea. It's about persistence and resilience. There were days when I felt like giving up. There were days when I doubted myself and wondered if I had made the right choice. But I kept pushing forward, and eventually, my small business grew into a full-fledged company. Fast forward a few years, and my company is doing incredibly well. We've expanded our product line, reached customers all over the world, and even secured partnerships with major retailers. We've gone from a one-person operation to a team of 25 employees, and I've had the opportunity to invest in other startups. I'm not going to lie, it hasn't been easy. Entrepreneurship is full of challenges, and there have been many times when I wanted to quit. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. I've learned more than I ever could have imagined, and the experiences I've had along the way have shaped me into the person I am today. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect time. Start now, even if you don't have all the answers. Be willing to fail, because failure is part of the journey. And most importantly, don't ever stop learning. The road to success is long, but with the right mindset and persistence, you can make it happen. I'm still far from where I want to be, but I'm proud of how far I've come. Looking back at my college days, I can hardly believe how much has changed. From the guy who was barely scraping by to the entrepreneur I am now, it's been a wild ride. And I can't wait to see where this journey takes me next. I never thought I'd be the one to build a business from the ground up. Growing up, I wasn't the entrepreneurial type. I didn't have lemonade stands as a kid, nor did I try to sell anything to my neighbors. In fact, I barely got by in school, and I definitely didn't see myself as someone who could build something from scratch. But then, one day, everything changed. It was 2016, and I was in my late 20s, working at a corporate job that I had convinced myself I was lucky to have. My 9-to-5 wasn't bad, but it wasn't fulfilling either. I spent my days writing reports, attending meetings, and following processes that seemed like they had no end. It was a decent job with a steady paycheck, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I always knew that I wanted more, but I didn't know what more was until one fateful moment. It started with a conversation. One night, I was having drinks with a friend from college who had left her corporate job a few years earlier to start a small online business selling custom jewelry. She was doing well, far better than I had imagined. Her lifestyle was flexible, her income was growing, and she seemed genuinely happy. At the time, I was envious. I couldn't understand how someone could take such a big leap. But as she spoke about her journey, her enthusiasm was contagious. She mentioned how it all started with a simple idea and a passion for design. The conversation sparked something inside me. I wasn't a designer, but I had always been creative. I loved photography, graphic design, and had a knack for storytelling. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I could combine those passions into something unique. I could create a brand that catered to people who shared my interests. The idea of building a brand around something I truly loved began to take root. The next few months were filled with late-night research. I scoured the internet, learning everything I could about starting an online business. I read blogs, watched YouTube videos, and joined Facebook groups filled with aspiring entrepreneurs. It was overwhelming at first. I didn't know the first thing about e-commerce, marketing, or logistics. But the more I learned, the more I felt ready to take the plunge. I saved up a small amount of money and decided to invest it in my new venture. My first idea was to create a niche online store that sold high-quality camera accessories for photographers and videographers. At the time, I was really into photography and knew how important good gear was. I spent countless hours researching suppliers, designing a website, and figuring out how to manage inventory. I remember spending nights just reading about SEO, search engine optimization, and learning how to get my website seen on Google. I also got on Instagram and started posting content related to photography, hoping to build an audience before my store even launched. Launching the store was nerve-wracking. I had no idea if people would actually buy my products. I remember the night I finally pressed the publish button on my website. It felt like I was sending my soul into the void, hoping someone would notice. The first few days went by with no sales, and I started doubting myself. Maybe I had done all this work for nothing. Then, on day 4, it happened. I got my first sale. I couldn't believe it. Someone, somewhere, had bought something I had created and put out into the world. It wasn't much, a small camera strap, but it felt like a huge victory. That first sale gave me the confidence I needed to keep going. But I knew I needed to get better at marketing if I wanted to keep the momentum going. I focused on Instagram first. I started creating more engaging posts, sharing photography tips, and even running small giveaways to attract attention. Slowly but surely, the orders began to trickle in. I was far from quitting my day job, but I had started to see the potential. By the end of the first year, I had made a profit. Not much, but enough to know that I was onto something. The turning point came when I decided to invest in Facebook ads. I had read that they could be a game changer, but I had no experience with paid advertising. I set aside a small budget and created my first campaign. It was a disaster. I spent $200 on ads that didn't convert at all. I was about to give up when I decided to take a step back and learn more about how Facebook ads worked. I took an online course and started experimenting with different ad strategies. I learned how to target the right audience, how to write compelling copy, and how to design eye-catching visuals. With this knowledge, I relaunched my ads. This time they worked. Sales began to increase. My website traffic grew, and for the first time, I felt like my business was on the right track. The next year was a whirlwind. I expanded my product range, hired a part-time employee to help with order fulfillment, and reinvested every penny I made back into the business. I also started collaborating with influencers in the photography space, which helped boost my brand's visibility. By the end of 2018, I had quit my corporate job. I was officially a full-time entrepreneur. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of challenges. There were times when the business didn't make enough money to cover expenses. I dealt with customer complaints, issues with suppliers, and long nights of packaging orders. There were moments when I wondered if I was crazy for leaving the stability of a corporate job. But every time I hit a roadblock, I reminded myself why I started. I loved what I was doing. I believed in my brand. And most importantly, I knew I couldn't go back. In 2019, my business hit its first six-figure revenue. By 2020, it was bringing in over $500,000 annually. I had built a team, and we had expanded into new markets. What started as a small online store had grown into a full-fledged business. I couldn't believe how far I had come, but I also knew this was just the beginning. Today, my brand is still growing, and I'm constantly learning and adapting. It's not always easy, but I've never been more fulfilled. I went from someone who never thought they could build a business to an entrepreneur who has created something that truly reflects my passions. If I can do it, anyone can. The key is to start, keep learning, and never give up on what you believe in. The journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't always glamorous, but it was worth every late night, every mistake, and every risk. If you're thinking about starting your own business, just do it. Take the first step and keep moving forward. It might feel impossible at first, but if you keep working at it, the rewards will come. I never thought I'd be the one to start a business. Growing up, I had no entrepreneurial aspirations. I was the kid who did well in school but never thought much about the future beyond getting a good job, paying bills, and living a stable life. I didn't have a rich uncle or connections that could give me a head start. I didn't even have a grand idea or business plan. It all started with a mistake. It was the summer after college. I had just graduated with a degree in marketing and was looking for my first real job. The economy wasn't great, and job offers were scarce. After weeks of sending out applications and not hearing back, I had almost given up hope. I spent my days at home, playing video games and watching Netflix, trying to ignore the pressure that was building around me. My parents, especially my mom, kept reminding me that I needed to get a job, but I was starting to feel defeated. One day, I took a break from my job search and decided to mess around with a little side project, designing custom t-shirts. It was a random thought, something I had seen people do on Instagram. I didn't think it would go anywhere, but I figured it was worth trying. I went online, found some websites that allowed you to design and print custom t-shirts, and spent a few hours playing with the design tools. I wasn't a designer, but I liked the idea of putting my own twist on a product. After a few days, I had designed a few shirts and decided to order them. When they arrived, I posted a few pictures on social media. At first, the response was lukewarm. Some people liked the designs, but no one was rushing to buy. But a few weeks later, something unexpected happened. One of my friends shared my post, and it started to gain a little traction. I'm not sure why it clicked, but it did. More and more people started commenting, asking if they could buy one. I was in shock. I had a product that people actually wanted. This was when I made my first big mistake. Instead of researching and understanding the logistics, I jumped in without a clear plan. I started ordering large quantities of shirts and paying for print runs before I had even sold a single one. I thought, if people want them, I should have inventory ready. I poured all my savings into buying bulk shirts and printing them, hoping I could sell them quickly. It was a disaster. I had overordered, and the shirts were sitting in my apartment, taking up space. What's worse, I hadn't accounted for the cost of marketing and reaching potential customers. It felt like I was losing money every day. I was at a crossroads. Should I give up, or should I double down and try to make this work? I chose the latter. I started learning everything I could about marketing, e-commerce, and running a business. I read books, watched YouTube videos, and followed successful entrepreneurs on social media. Slowly, I began to understand where I had gone wrong. I had to shift my focus. Instead of buying in bulk, I needed to use print-on-demand services that would only print shirts as they were ordered. I needed to focus on growing my social media presence and learning how to market effectively. It took months, but I started to build an online store. I invested in Facebook ads and Instagram promotions, trying to get the word out. I also reached out to influencers and offered them free shirts in exchange for posts. At first, the sales were slow, but gradually, they picked up. My designs began to resonate with people, and more customers were purchasing. It was an instant success, but I started seeing real growth. By the time a year had passed, I had a small but steady stream of income coming in from my online store. It wasn't much, but it was enough to cover my bills and allow me to quit my day job. I was finally living the dream, or at least the dream I never knew I had. But even with the growth, I was still facing challenges. For one, I had never learned to manage the financial side of a business. I was terrible at tracking my expenses and profits, and it was easy to get caught up in the excitement of sales. There were months when I would overspend on marketing or products, and I'd find myself scrambling to make ends meet. I hired a part-time accountant to help me get my finances in order, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. With their help, I created a budget, tracked my spending, and started setting aside money for taxes and reinvestment into the business. Around the same time, I realized I needed to expand my product line. T-shirts were great, but I could only sell so many before people started losing interest. I added hats, hoodies, and even phone cases. I also started experimenting with limited edition releases, creating a sense of exclusivity around certain designs. This was a game changer. The more I focused on creating unique and high-quality products, the more my brand grew. But even as things were looking up, I was hit with another setback. My website crashed. One day, without warning, it just went down. My entire store, my inventory, and my customers' orders were inaccessible. I was in a panic. How could I run a business if people couldn't buy from me? I called my hosting provider and spent hours on the phone trying to resolve the issue. It turned out to be a technical problem, and I learned a valuable lesson. Always have a backup plan. I immediately hired a web developer to help prevent this from happening again. From that point on, I made sure to back up my website regularly and kept a list of emergency contacts for technical support. Over time, my business grew even more. I reinvested my profits into new marketing strategies, expanded my social media presence, and even hired a small team to help with design, customer service, and fulfillment. The dream I once thought was impossible was now becoming a reality. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of late nights, moments of doubt, and challenges I didn't foresee. Yet, through all the mistakes and failures, I learned how to be resourceful, persistent, and resilient. I had to adapt and pivot when things didn't go as planned. And most importantly, I learned that success isn't just about having a great idea. It's about working hard, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up. Today, my brand is thriving. It's not a multi-million-dollar business, but I'm proud of what I've built. It's my full-time job, and it provides me with the freedom I once dreamed of. I'm not where I thought I would be 5 years ago, but I'm exactly where I need to be. And to think, it all started with a simple mistake, a shirt design, and a leap of faith. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. Growing up, I was always the kid who did well in school, but never really stood out. My family wasn't poor, but we didn't exactly have the money to throw around either. My dad worked at a factory, and my mom was a schoolteacher. We lived in a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I had the typical dreams of becoming a lawyer or doctor, jobs that I believed would provide security and a good life. But life had other plans. After graduating from college with a degree in business, I went into a corporate job, thinking that the 9-to-5 grind was the path I was supposed to follow. I joined a mid-sized marketing firm, and I was excited to start my career. The pay was decent, and I had great colleagues. I figured this was it. I'd climb the ladder, work my way up, and eventually reach a comfortable position. Fast forward 2 years, and I was miserable. The work was boring, and my manager seemed more concerned about his quarterly bonuses than the well-being of the team. I was just another cog in the machine. But what frustrated me the most was that I didn't feel like I was really contributing anything. I didn't feel like I was growing or learning anymore. One evening, after a long day at work, I got home and plopped onto my couch, staring at my phone. I was scrolling through Instagram when I came across an ad for an online course on starting a business. The ad was from a guy who seemed to have it all figured out. He was living in Bali, working from his laptop, and making money while sipping cocktails on the beach. It sounded too good to be true, but something about it clicked with me. I clicked the link and signed up for the course. At the time, I didn't even know what I wanted to start a business in, but I figured I'd figure it out along the way. The first lesson of the course was all about mindset. It talked about how entrepreneurship wasn't about having a great idea right away, but about developing a certain mindset that would allow you to push through failure and uncertainty. The instructor emphasized the importance of resilience, and I realized that I didn't have that mindset in my current job. I was just coasting, waiting for the next promotion or raise, but I wasn't actually taking charge of my life. For the next few months, I immersed myself in the course material. I spent my evenings after work studying marketing strategies, learning how to build a website, and figuring out the basics of e-commerce. During this time, I started thinking about the things I was passionate about, and that's when it hit me. I had always loved coffee. I was that guy who had a coffee maker in the office, who brewed a fresh cup every morning, and who would visit local coffee shops on weekends just to try new blends. Why not build a business around it? I decided to start an online coffee subscription service. The idea was simple. Curate unique coffee beans from around the world and deliver them to customers' doors every month. At first, I had no idea how to source coffee beans or how the subscription model even worked. But the more I researched, the more I realized there was a niche market for high-quality, artisanal coffee. I started small, sourcing beans from a local roaster and creating a website with the little knowledge I had gained from the course. I spent hours designing the site, setting up an online store, and figuring out how to handle payments. I had zero experience in web development, but I watched countless YouTube tutorials and made it work. In the beginning, I was just focused on getting the site live, figuring out logistics later. After launching the website, I didn't get the flood of orders I had hoped for. In fact, I barely got any orders at all. I was devastated. It was like all my hard work had been for nothing. But instead of giving up, I took a step back and reevaluated my approach. The one thing I had neglected was marketing. I realized that simply having a website wouldn't get people to buy. I needed to put myself out there and start building an audience. I began posting on social media, reaching out to influencers in the coffee community, and running small Facebook ads. Slowly but surely, the orders started trickling in. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me motivated. Each order was a small win. The turning point came when I reached out to a well-known coffee blogger who agreed to review my product. The review went viral, and suddenly my business was gaining traction. That moment changed everything. Within the next 6 months, I went from a few customers to hundreds. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, expanding my inventory and improving my marketing efforts. I learned that building a brand was about more than just selling a product. It was about creating an experience, telling a story, and connecting with customers on a deeper level. People didn't just want to buy coffee. They wanted to be a part of something special. By the end of the first year, I had scaled my business far beyond what I initially thought was possible. I hired a small team to help with operations, and I expanded the product line to include coffee accessories and merchandise. My subscription service had turned into a full-fledged e-commerce brand. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. The person who started that small online coffee business was someone who had no idea what they were doing. But what kept me going was the belief that I could learn, adapt, and grow. I didn't have a blueprint for success, but I had the determination to figure it out along the way. And that's the most important lesson I learned. Entrepreneurship isn't about having the perfect plan. It's about being willing to take risks, learn from failure, and keep pushing forward. I've since sold the company for a significant profit, but the experience taught me more than I could have imagined. The world of entrepreneurship is unpredictable, full of challenges and uncertainties, but it's also full of opportunity. If there's one thing I know now, it's that success doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from embracing it and using it as fuel to move forward. I'm currently working on my next venture, and this time, I'm even more excited. The journey never ends, but it's a journey worth taking. A few years ago, I found myself stuck in a routine that felt both comfortable and suffocating. I had a decent job in a corporate office, a steady paycheck, and the kind of life people told me I should be grateful for. But deep down, I felt like something was missing. I wasn't passionate about the work. I wasn't excited about waking up every day, and I sure as hell wasn't feeling fulfilled. I always had this nagging desire to create something, to build something that was mine, something that could make a real impact. But I was afraid. Afraid of failing, of losing everything, of stepping into the unknown. One day, I decided I couldn't ignore that feeling anymore. It wasn't a big, dramatic moment. It wasn't like I suddenly had a brilliant idea or saw a clear path forward. I just decided that if I was going to spend my life doing something, it had to be something that mattered to me. So, I quit my job. And honestly, I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have a safety net. I had nothing but a vague sense of urgency and the determination to figure it out as I went. I spent the next couple of months trying to find something I could get behind. I tried a few side hustles. I launched an online store, selling products I thought would be cool. I built websites for small businesses. I even dabbled in social media marketing. But nothing seemed to stick. There was no spark, no fire. It felt like I was just spinning my wheels, doing things that seemed productive but weren't moving me any closer to my ultimate goal. And then, one afternoon, I found myself talking to a friend who had just started a podcast. He was telling me about the difficulties of building an audience, the grind of creating content, and the hustle of getting people to care about what you have to say. That conversation sparked something in me. It made me realize that I wasn't alone in my struggle, that there were people out there, just like me, trying to make something happen, trying to carve out a place for themselves in a world that seemed to already have it all figured out. I had always loved storytelling. I had spent years writing on the side, sharing thoughts, ideas, and experiences with whoever would listen. What if I could turn that into something? What if I could combine my passion for writing with my desire to create a business? I started brainstorming ideas, researching, and planning. I came up with the idea of starting a personal development blog, something that shared real, raw, and relatable stories about the journey of building a life you love. I wanted to give people the kind of content that I had been searching for during my own struggles. So, I dove headfirst into creating the blog. I bought a domain name, set up hosting, and started writing. It wasn't pretty at first. My first few posts were all over the place. They were a mishmash of ideas, personal reflections, and poorly executed SEO strategies. I had no clue what I was doing when it came to design or promotion, but I kept going. I wrote a post every single day for the first month. Some of them got no traffic at all, while others picked up a little momentum. But I didn't care about the numbers. I cared about the process. I cared about getting better. Slowly, my posts began to resonate with more people. I I started getting emails from readers, thanking me for my honesty, telling me that my words had helped them on their own journeys. I started to see that it wasn't about having a perfect plan or a flawless product from day one. It was about showing up every day, putting in the work, and being authentic. The more I did that, the more my audience grew. They weren't just reading my blog, they were becoming part of my story. Around the 6-month mark, things started to click. I had built a solid foundation of content. My email list was growing steadily, and I was starting to monetize my blog through affiliate marketing and sponsored posts. It wasn't enough to quit my day job yet, but it was enough to make me believe that this could become something real. The next step was figuring out how to scale. I realized that to grow beyond what I could handle alone, I needed to build a team. I needed to outsource tasks like graphic design, social media management, and SEO. I had never managed a team before, and the thought of giving up control was terrifying. But I quickly realized that I couldn't do everything myself if I wanted to grow. I found some great freelancers to help me with the areas I struggled in, and soon I was able to focus more on creating content and strategizing for the future. I also started to work on products, digital courses, ebooks, and webinars, so I could offer even more value to my audience. As the revenue from my blog grew, I finally reached the point where I was able to leave my day job. It wasn't an overnight success, though. There were times when I questioned everything, times when I was ready to give up, convinced that I had made a huge mistake. But every time I faced a setback, I reminded myself why I started in the first place. I was building something for myself, something that was meaningful, something that aligned with my passions. Now, a few years later, my blog is turned into a full-fledged business. I have a growing team of people who help with everything from marketing to customer service. I'm able to work from anywhere, and I've been fortunate enough to have the freedom to travel and explore new ideas. But none of that would have been possible if I hadn't taken that first step into the unknown. If you're thinking about starting something of your own, just do it. You don't need to have it all figured out from the beginning. You don't need a perfect plan or a ton of money. You just need the courage to take that first step and the perseverance to keep going. If you do that, everything else will fall into place. It won't be easy. There will be days when it feels like you're failing, like you're never going to make it. But I promise you, if you keep going, you'll get there. Just keep showing up. The world needs what you have to offer. And in the end, that's all that matters. It was 2015 when I first realized that the office job wasn't for me. I had just graduated from college with a business degree and landed a decent position at a mid-sized marketing firm. The pay was good, the benefits were solid, and on paper, everything was perfect. But after a year of working 9 to 5, I started to feel like I was losing my sense of purpose. Every morning, I got up early, rushed to the office, and spent hours sitting in front of a computer screen. My work was fine, but it was uninspiring. I had some great colleagues, but there was this constant sense of monotony that lingered in the air. I felt trapped in a cycle that I wasn't sure how to break free from. To make matters worse, I was constantly fighting the idea that I wasn't living up to my potential. I had always been someone who wanted more freedom, more creativity, more control over my time. So, after a long night of debating with myself, I decided to take a leap of faith. I handed in my resignation letter. It was a terrifying decision, and even though I didn't have a clear plan in place, I knew I had to follow my gut. For the next few months, I tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I had a few ideas. Maybe I could start my own marketing agency, maybe I could build an e-commerce business, or maybe I could get into tech. But nothing seemed to really click. I was spinning my wheels, constantly jumping from one idea to the next without any clear direction. The more I thought about it, the more overwhelming it all became. One night, I was scrolling through social media when I saw an ad for a dropshipping course. The concept sounded simple. You sell products online without holding any inventory. Instead, when someone buys from your store, the supplier ships the product directly to the customer. I had heard of dropshipping before, but never seriously considered it. However, something about this particular ad caught my attention. I did some research and realized that people were making serious money from it. The idea of running an online business that required little upfront investment seemed too good to pass up. I didn't have much to lose, and I figured it could be a good starting point while I figured out what my long-term plans were. So, I enrolled in the course, took out a small loan to fund the business, and dove in headfirst. At first, everything seemed to be going wrong. I struggled with the technical aspects of building an online store, and I was constantly tweaking my website, trying to make it look professional. I spent hours trying to pick the right products to sell, but nothing felt quite right. I wasn't getting any sales, and the few visitors I had on my site didn't convert. It was frustrating, to say the least, but I refused to give up. I knew that any new business would take time to gain traction, so I pushed through the difficulties. I spent more time studying successful entrepreneurs, learning about marketing strategies, and improving my website. Slowly, things started to improve. My first sale came in, and while it wasn't much, it felt like a huge victory. That moment made me realize that success wasn't going to happen overnight, but it was possible if I kept grinding. I decided to double down and really commit to growing the business. I spent even more time learning about Facebook ads, SEO, and how to drive traffic to my store. I began experimenting with different types of products and marketing campaigns. And little by little, I started to see the results. My sales increased, and I started to feel a sense of control over my own destiny. I was no longer dependent on a boss or a 9-to-5 job to survive. Over the next year, I scaled my business. I hired a few freelancers to help with the workload, and I was able to automate much of the process. I reinvested my profits into marketing, refining my product offerings, and improving customer service. By the end of 2016, I was making more money than I had ever made at my previous job. The freedom I gained was priceless. But as my business grew, so did the challenges. I encountered supply chain issues, dealt with customer complaints, and had to navigate the complexities of managing a growing business. The stress was real, but the thrill of building something from the ground up kept me motivated. I realized that being an entrepreneur was far from glamorous. It wasn't just about making money, it was about solving problems and constantly adapting to new circumstances. By 2018, my business had hit a significant milestone. I had built a brand that was recognizable in the niche I had chosen, and I had a team of people who helped me run the day-to-day operations. But I still wasn't satisfied. I had achieved financial freedom, but I wanted to challenge myself further. I decided to branch out into new markets, creating new products and services under the same brand umbrella. That was when I hit a major turning point. I launched a new product line, and it completely flopped. The sales were dismal, and I had invested a lot of money into marketing and inventory. I was devastated. I had been riding high for so long that I didn't anticipate failure would come crashing down on me so quickly. For a brief moment, I thought about giving up and walking away from it all. But then I remembered something important. Failure wasn't the end. It was a lesson. I reflected on my journey and realized that the most successful entrepreneurs were the ones who could learn from their failures and pivot when necessary. Instead of wallowing in disappointment, I decided to take what I had learned and move forward. I rebranded the product line, improved the marketing strategy, and relaunched it with a fresh approach. To my surprise, the second launch was a massive success. It was a humbling experience, but it reminded me of the importance of perseverance and adaptability. I learned that entrepreneurship was a constant cycle of trial and error, and the key to success wasn't avoiding failure, it was embracing it and learning from it. Fast forward to 2023, and my business is thriving. It's no longer just a side hustle, it's a full-fledged operation with multiple revenue streams. I've expanded into different industries, and I'm constantly looking for new opportunities to grow. Along the way, I've built a network of like-minded entrepreneurs who inspire me to keep pushing forward. I've traveled the world, attended conferences, and met some incredible people who have taught me valuable lessons. Looking back, I'm grateful for every challenge and every setback. Without those moments of failure, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm living a life that I've always dreamed of. The freedom, the flexibility, and the satisfaction of building something from scratch, there's nothing quite like it. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not a straight path. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of twists and turns. But if you're willing to put in the work, take risks, and learn from your mistakes, you can create something truly special. I'm proof of that. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm on the journey, and that's enough for me. If you're thinking about starting your own business or taking that leap into the unknown, I say go for it. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I was 23 years old when I first decided to start a business. Fresh out of college, I had this idea that I was going to change the world, or at least make a decent living doing something I loved. The idea hit me after a particularly frustrating experience at a local coffee shop, where I had to wait in line for what felt like an eternity just to get a cup of coffee. I remember thinking, there has to be a better way to do this. My background wasn't in business, far from it, actually. I had majored in psychology and minored in art history, two fields that I thought would help me understand people but didn't exactly scream entrepreneur. But when I looked around at what people were willing to pay for, it wasn't the degree that mattered. It was the idea. And I had one. So I decided I was going to start a coffee delivery service. The concept was simple: deliver quality coffee straight to the doorsteps of busy professionals and college students, cutting out the wait time at coffee shops altogether. At first, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have any experience in logistics, customer service, or running a business. My only assets were my drive and an old car I had inherited from my grandfather. I started by researching the market. There were a few companies doing similar things, but I realized they were either overpriced or didn't offer what I wanted: premium coffee that was delivered on time, without any hassle. I began working nights at a local cafe to learn everything I could about coffee: the beans, the brewing techniques, the equipment. In the morning, I would wake up early and spend hours scouring the internet for suppliers, trying to figure out how to set up a website and creating a business plan that didn't look like a high school project. I borrowed money from family to buy the equipment I needed and started promoting the service on social media. My initial marketing efforts were terrible. I didn't have the budget to run paid ads, so I relied on organic posts. I posted pictures of myself making coffee, humorous captions about being your personal barista, and shared how passionate I was about bringing good coffee to people's doors. My first customers were a few friends and family members who humored me, and that was how I started. Things didn't take off immediately. I made mistake after mistake. I misjudged delivery times. Orders would get mixed up, and I had no idea how to scale the business without burning out. At one point, I was delivering coffee at 6 a.m., then going to my day job until 4 p.m., and back to making deliveries again. I barely slept, but I was determined. After several months of struggling, I realized that the problem wasn't the coffee, it was my delivery model. I was trying to do everything myself, and it wasn't sustainable. That's when I had a breakthrough. I reached out to a friend who was a logistics expert and asked if he could help me figure out a more efficient way to handle deliveries. He introduced me to the idea of a subscription model. Customers could sign up for weekly or monthly deliveries of fresh coffee. This would give me a predictable income, allow me to scale more easily, and reduce the constant, on-demand chaos of trying to fulfill orders. I started small with a few beta testers. The subscription model worked better than I imagined. Customers loved the convenience of having coffee delivered right to their door at a set time, and I was able to plan my deliveries more efficiently. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. I quickly learned that the cost of delivery was eating into my profits, so I had to rethink the business logistics once again. Instead of delivering the coffee myself, I partnered with a local courier company that specialized in small deliveries. This allowed me to focus on the business side of things while they took care of getting the product to the customers. This move helped me scale, but it also introduced new challenges, especially in terms of quality control. I had to find a way to ensure that the coffee was still top-notch by the time it reached the customer, and I had to deal with the occasional complaint about delayed or cold coffee. By this point, I had built a small but loyal customer base, and the subscription service was growing. But it wasn't enough to just deliver coffee. I wanted to offer something unique. That's when I started experimenting with adding gourmet snacks to the delivery options. I partnered with local bakeries and snack producers, offering a curated selection of baked goods that would pair perfectly with the coffee. This new addition to the service caught on quickly, and my business started to get more attention. I also realized that I needed to leverage technology to improve customer experience. I invested in a custom-built website with an intuitive app that allowed customers to track their deliveries in real time and adjust their subscription preferences. The app also allowed me to send personalized recommendations based on their coffee preferences and previous orders. By this point, I was getting a steady stream of customers, and the business was starting to make money. But success came with its own set of problems. As the business grew, I had to hire employees. At first, I brought in friends who were looking for extra work, but as we scaled, I had to bring in professionals. I struggled with delegating tasks and managing people at first, but I learned quickly. I had to learn how to be a leader, and that meant letting go of the idea that I could do everything myself. I surrounded myself with people who were better than me in certain areas, and slowly but surely, the business began to run like a well-oiled machine. As the years went by, my coffee delivery service continued to grow. I expanded into new cities, invested in better equipment, and kept improving the customer experience. Today, the business has hundreds of employees, operates in several states, and generates millions of dollars in revenue. But I never forget where I came from. I still work directly with our suppliers and occasionally take a delivery route just to remind myself of how far we've come. The road to success wasn't easy. I faced rejection, financial difficulties, burnout, and doubt, but I never gave up. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the key to entrepreneurship is persistence. The idea doesn't have to be perfect, but the willingness to keep going, even when things seem impossible, is what separates the successful from the unsuccessful. Looking back, I realized that I was lucky in many ways, lucky to have had the chance to take risks, lucky to have the support of family and friends, and lucky to have learned from every failure. I'm now in a position to help other aspiring entrepreneurs, and I love being able to share my story and tell them that success doesn't happen overnight, but it's absolutely worth the struggle. I was 22 when I had my aha moment. I'd been hustling hard for years, trying to figure out a way to break into the world of business. Growing up in a small town, my family didn't have much. We lived paycheck to paycheck, and money was always tight. Despite the challenges, I was determined to make something of myself. The idea of financial freedom, of not worrying about bills every month, was what motivated me. I spent years working at odd jobs, anything to make a buck. I started out as a busboy at a local restaurant, then moved to waiting tables. After that, I worked at a gas station, then a fast food joint, and finally, I landed a gig in retail. The retail job was where I learned the most. I started to observe how the business operated, from inventory management to sales tactics. I'd watch my manager interact with customers and thought to myself, I could do this. I could run a business. But there was one problem: I had no idea what business to start. I was 22, with no business experience, no funding, and no clear direction. I tried to read books, watched countless YouTube videos, and even took online courses. But everything felt overwhelming. I was flooded with options. Do I open a physical store? Start an online business? Do I need to create a product? After a few months of endless brainstorming, I decided to focus on something I knew: e-commerce. At the time, dropshipping was gaining popularity, so I thought it would be the perfect entry point into the business world. I had zero capital, so the low-risk nature of dropshipping was attractive. I spent weeks researching suppliers, creating a website, and building a brand. I chose a niche, fitness equipment, and launched my online store. I remember sitting at my desk the night I launched it, waiting for the orders to roll in. Nothing happened. Days went by. Weeks. I got a few clicks, maybe a few views, but no sales. I spent money on Facebook ads, Google ads, Instagram influencers, all the marketing strategies I had learned from watching online tutorials. But nothing worked. My website was a ghost town. I was out of money, and the frustration was eating away at me. I thought, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. One night, after my retail job, I decided to take a different approach. I went back to the basics. Instead of trying to replicate what everyone else was doing, I focused on one thing: providing real value. I looked at the products I was selling and asked myself, who would benefit from this? I did some research and realized that my target audience was fitness enthusiasts who were also beginners. Most of the fitness equipment out there was either too basic or way too advanced. There was a gap in the market for mid-level equipment that was affordable and easy to use. I revamped my website, repositioned my marketing, and redefined my brand. I started creating content around fitness, showing how the products could improve people's workouts. I shared beginner-friendly tips, motivational content, and workout plans. I reached out to micro-influencers and offered them free products in exchange for honest reviews. Slowly but surely, I started seeing traction. The first sale felt like a massive win. I celebrated by buying a cheap bottle of champagne from the corner store. But then came the hard part. How do you scale a business with minimal resources? I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, tweaking my ads, expanding my product offerings, and improving customer service. Things started to pick up, but I quickly learned that running an e-commerce business was far from easy. There were inventory issues, customer complaints, shipping delays, and of course, the constant battle to keep up with the competition. There were times when I felt like I was drowning. I thought about quitting more times than I can count, but I stuck with it. One of the biggest turning points came when I decided to focus on customer retention. Instead of just chasing after new customers, I worked hard to build a community around my brand. I created a loyalty program, sent personalized emails, and even started a blog where I shared workout advice and health tips. I also started asking my customers for feedback. I wanted to know what they liked, what they didn't like, and how I could improve. The insights I received were invaluable. One customer suggested that I offer free workout classes with the equipment they bought, and that idea became a game changer. I partnered with local gyms to offer virtual fitness classes, and the response was overwhelming. As the business grew, I was able to hire a small team to help with customer service, product sourcing, and marketing. It was scary because I was taking on employees and I had no idea how to manage a team. But little by little, we built a system that worked. Fast forward to a year later, and my business had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We were generating consistent revenue, and I had built a small but loyal customer base. But success brought its own set of challenges. As we grew, I found myself overwhelmed by the sheer amount of decisions I had to make. I had to learn how to delegate, how to trust my team, and how to think long-term. One of the hardest lessons I learned during this period was about failure. I had several products fail, whether it was poor quality, bad timing, or just not resonating with my audience. At first, I took it personally. I thought I was failing. But then I realized that failure wasn't the end. It was just part of the process. Every failure was an opportunity to learn, improve, and get better. The turning point came when I launched my own brand of fitness gear. Up until that point, I had been dropshipping other people's products, but I realized that creating my own line would give me more control over quality and pricing. I worked with manufacturers to design custom products, and the launch was a huge success. The business continued to grow. We expanded into new markets, started offering international shipping, and even began partnering with larger fitness brands. I found myself working on bigger projects and collaborating with people I never imagined I'd have access to. The most surreal part? Watching my business get featured in a popular industry magazine. I had gone from working late nights at a retail job to becoming a legitimate entrepreneur in a span of just a couple of years. Now, I'm 27. The business is thriving. I've learned so much, not just about business, but about myself. I've learned that success doesn't come overnight, and it doesn't come without its fair share of struggles. I've learned that persistence is key. But more importantly, I've learned that failure isn't the opposite of success, it's a part of it. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From the days of barely scraping by to now, where I'm living the life I always dreamed of. If you would have told me a few years ago that I'd be where I am today, I would have laughed. But here I am, proof that if you keep pushing, no matter how many times you fail, you can turn your dreams into reality. I know the journey is far from over, but I'm excited for what's to come. I'm ready for the next chapter. I was 23 years old, living in a cramped studio apartment in the middle of a city that never stopped buzzing. It was one of those places where you could hear the hum of traffic and the endless chatter of people, even at 3 a.m. The kind of place that made you feel alive, but also utterly exhausted. I had just graduated from college with a degree in business management, but I wasn't working at a fancy corporate job or climbing the ladder at some high-powered firm. In fact, I was waiting tables at a small cafe, barely scraping by. My dream had always been to run my own business. I'd spent most of my time in college thinking about how I could create something that could change people's lives. Something that wasn't just about making money, but about making an impact. But like most recent grads, I was stuck. I had no idea where to start. Then came the idea. One night, while waiting on a table of two businessmen at the cafe, I overheard a conversation about how difficult it was to find reliable contractors. The two guys were talking about a project they were working on and how they had to constantly deal with contractors who were either unreliable or overpriced. As I listened, I couldn't help but think that there was a way to fix this. A platform that connected clients with trusted contractors, offering transparent pricing and reviews, and making it easy to find professionals who actually delivered. I didn't have the resources or the experience to pull it off, but I couldn't shake the idea. I stayed up late that night, jotting down ideas and brainstorming. I did some quick research and found out that there were a few companies that had tried to solve this problem in the past, but none of them had truly nailed it. They were either too expensive or didn't have a large enough network of contractors. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. This could be my shot. But I didn't know where to begin. I took the plunge and quit my waitressing job a month later. I didn't have a clear plan, but I knew that if I didn't try now, I would regret it. I started working on my business idea every single day. I spent hours on end researching the industry, talking to contractors, and figuring out what kind of platform would actually work. I taught myself to code, read up on marketing strategies, and learned everything I could about the startup world. I was completely broke, but I was determined to make it work. I reached out to a few developers who could help me build the website, and after a lot of back and forth, we got something that resembled what I had in mind. But there was one major issue. I didn't have any contractors on the platform. Without them, it was just a website with no real value. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I went out and met contractors in person. I spent days driving around the city, visiting construction sites, and knocking on doors. I talked to electricians, plumbers, general contractors, you name it. I explained my idea to them, told them how I wanted to help them find more work, and how this platform would give them more visibility. Some were skeptical, but a few agreed to give it a shot. With a handful of contractors on board, I launched the website. It wasn't perfect. Far from it. There were bugs, the interface wasn't user-friendly, and the traffic was basically non-existent. But I didn't care. I knew that it was just the beginning. I spent the next several months hustling to get people to use the platform. I cold called businesses, went to local networking events, and reached out to everyone I knew. I had no marketing budget, so everything was word of mouth. Slowly but surely, the contractors started bringing in clients, and the clients started leaving positive reviews. That was the key to building trust. People wanted to work with contractors who had been vetted and recommended by others. But then something unexpected happened. We started to gain traction. Contractors were recommending us to their peers, and clients were telling their friends. The traffic grew, and before I knew it, we were getting hundreds of visitors to the site every day. I brought in a small team to help me handle the growing demand. We improved the user experience, added new features, and began investing in paid marketing to scale faster. A year after launching, we reached a milestone I never thought possible. We hit $1 million in revenue. It was surreal. I had come from a place where I could barely afford rent to running a business that was now turning a profit. But with success came new challenges. The bigger we got, the more competition we faced. Larger companies with bigger marketing budgets started to enter the market, and I realized that we needed to do something different to stand out. I decided to focus on building relationships with both contractors and clients. I wanted our platform to be more than just a marketplace. I wanted it to be a community. So, we launched a loyalty program for contractors, giving them incentives for staying active on the platform and providing excellent service. We also implemented a feature that allowed clients to directly message contractors, making the process more personal and transparent. The changes worked. We began to see even more growth. By year 3, we had expanded into multiple cities and had thousands of contractors on the platform. Our user base continued to grow, and the revenue followed suit. I still remember the day we hit $10 million in revenue. It was a huge milestone, but by then, I had become so used to the hustle that it didn't feel as dramatic as it should have. Looking back, I can't believe how far we've come. There were so many moments when I felt like giving up, when things seemed impossible, and when I didn't know how we were going to make it through. But every time I hit a roadblock, I reminded myself that failure wasn't an option. I knew that this was my one shot, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. Now, we're a leading platform in the industry, and I've learned so much along the way. I've learned how to build a business from the ground up, how to handle stress, and how to make tough decisions. But most importantly, I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It takes hard work, dedication, and a willingness to fail forward. I'm proud of what we've built, but I also know that the journey is far from over. Looking back at that 23-year-old who was just trying to figure out how to make a living, I can't believe how far I've come. But I also know that the best is yet to come. The lessons I've learned, the failures I've faced, and the challenges I've overcome have all been part of the process. And that's something I'll never forget. I've always believed that the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones who aren't afraid to fail. And for me, that lesson came hard and fast. Let me take you back to 2017. I was fresh out of college, armed with a degree in business administration, a few grand in savings, and a dream. I had this burning idea to create an app that would connect local businesses with potential customers through hyper-targeted advertising. In theory, it was perfect. Everyone needed to be on their phones, right? And small businesses were always looking for cost-effective marketing. My idea seemed like the perfect solution. I spent the next few months locked in my bedroom, building a prototype. I was broke, living off ramen and coffee, trying to turn my dream into reality. I barely slept. But the more I worked on it, the more it felt like the thing I was meant to do. Every time I faced a challenge, I'd push through. I had to, because failure wasn't an option. After months of coding, beta testing, and tweaking, I finally launched the app. I called it Local Boost. I went all out with my marketing campaign. I cold called hundreds of local businesses, offered free trials, and asked for reviews. Everything seemed to be going well at first. A couple of businesses signed up, and a few positive reviews came in. But then, as the days went by, the excitement wore off. The app wasn't growing at the pace I had hoped. The customer acquisition costs were higher than I expected, and retention rates were low. But here's the kicker. Through all that, I didn't give up. I couldn't. I had already invested so much time, money, and energy into this that failure felt like a personal defeat. I kept tweaking the app, adding features, optimizing the user interface, and even running paid ads to attract new customers. But despite all my efforts, I wasn't seeing the growth I needed. I had to face it. The dream I had been chasing was slipping away. It was a harsh reality, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. The realization that my idea wasn't as perfect as I had thought was a bitter pill to swallow. But there was no time to wallow in self-pity. I had bills to pay, a team to support, and a product that wasn't working. I felt trapped. So, I did what any good entrepreneur does when faced with failure. I pivoted. I reached out to a mentor, someone I trusted in the industry, and laid out everything: my struggles, my failures, and my questions. He listened patiently, and after a long pause, he asked me a simple question that completely changed my perspective. "Have you thought about who your ideal customer really is?" he asked. At first, I was confused. Of course, I had thought about my customers, small businesses. That was the entire point of the app. But as we discussed it further, I realized that I hadn't been as targeted as I should have been. I wasn't thinking about the unique needs of my ideal customer. I was trying to serve everyone, which meant I wasn't truly serving anyone. So, I took a step back and really analyzed my customer base. I found that the businesses using the app were primarily those that had some digital presence, but they weren't tech-savvy enough to understand advanced analytics or marketing strategies. They didn't want a complex tool. They just wanted something simple and effective. This revelation was a game-changer for me. I began to redesign the app from the ground up, this time with the focus on simplicity and ease of use. I stripped away most of the advanced features that had made the app so complicated, instead honing in on the basic functions that would actually solve my customers' problems. I kept the focus on local businesses, but I made sure that the user experience was intuitive and straightforward. At the same time, I refined my marketing strategy. I stopped trying to sell the app to everyone and focused exclusively on the small businesses that were a perfect fit. Instead of cold calling dozens of businesses at random, I began to carefully identify the businesses that would benefit most from the platform. I then reached out to them with a personalized pitch that was tailored to their specific needs. As soon as I made these changes, things started to click. Word spread. Businesses were signing up. And most importantly, they were staying. Customer retention began to improve, and the app's user base started to grow organically. I even began receiving emails from users thanking me for creating a tool that made their lives easier. But it didn't end there. I had learned a hard lesson about the importance of focus, customer understanding, and adaptability. With the app now gaining traction, I started thinking bigger. I invested heavily in scaling the business, expanding the team, and building partnerships with other local business services. I also raised capital from a few investors who were impressed with the direction we were headed. By 2019, Local Boost was growing at an incredible pace. We had become the go-to platform for small businesses looking to manage their digital marketing efforts. But what's wild is that the app didn't become a huge success because of an amazing idea. It succeeded because I was willing to adapt, pivot, and most importantly, learn from failure. Fast forward to today. Local Boost now serves thousands of businesses, and I've taken it to the next level with new tools and features that have transformed the way small businesses connect with customers. We've expanded internationally, and just last year, we hit profitability. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. What I've realized over the past few years is that entrepreneurship is all about perseverance. Failure is inevitable, but it's how you respond to it that makes the difference. I'm proof that you can fail and still come back stronger. If you're willing to adjust your strategy and keep moving forward, you can turn your setbacks into comebacks. The hardest moments are the ones that shape you the most. And now, looking back, I'm proud of every mistake, every setback, and every failure that I encountered along the way. It's all part of the process. To anyone out there struggling with their business or facing failure right now, just know this: it's not over. If you keep learning, keep adjusting, and keep pushing forward, success might just be waiting for you on the other side. It was a late Tuesday evening when I found myself sitting in my small, cramped apartment in Brooklyn, staring at my laptop screen with the weight of the world on my shoulders. The glow of the screen illuminated my face, and I couldn't help but feel a wave of disbelief wash over me. My bank account was almost empty, my startup was crumbling, and every single step I had taken seemed to lead to a dead end. But just a year ago, it was all so different. I had the world by the tail, a successful startup idea that everyone said was going to change the industry, and a team that was eager to follow me into the unknown. I had spent months refining the idea, assembling the right people, and pitching it to investors. They bought it. They really bought it. A few rounds of funding later, and I thought I was on my way to becoming the next big tech mogul. But things didn't go according to plan. It was supposed to be smooth sailing after the initial investment. But as we scaled, the issues started to surface. The market was tougher than we had anticipated. Our product wasn't resonating with users the way we had hoped. My team, once full of energy, started to grow tired and frustrated. Investors began to get impatient. It wasn't long before I realized that I was drowning in my own ambition. The worst part? I wasn't even sure where it all went wrong. I remember one particular morning, after a brutal board meeting, when I walked out of the office feeling like a failure. My lead developer, a brilliant guy named Jake, had just handed in his resignation. I tried to convince him to stay, to remind him of the vision we had, but his mind was already made up. As he walked out the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were losing more than just a talented employee. We were losing faith, and I was losing my grip on everything I had worked so hard for. I spent the next few weeks in a blur of phone calls and late-night coding sessions, trying to patch things up. But it was no use. The cracks in the foundation were too deep. One by one, my other team members followed Jake out the door. It wasn't just the product that was failing, it was the morale. I had always been the one who inspired everyone, the one who pushed them to keep going, but now I felt like the ship was sinking, and no matter how much I paddled, I couldn't keep it afloat. As the last of my team members left, I made the hardest decision of my life, to shut down the startup. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but at that point, there was no other choice. My investors weren't happy, my reputation was on the line, and the mounting debt was crushing. I had to let go. That night, as I sat in my apartment, staring at the screen, I realized something crucial. I wasn't done. I had built this company from nothing, and I wasn't going to let it define me. Sure, I had failed, but failure wasn't the end. It was just a part of the process. The question was, well, what would I do next? I decided to take a break. I didn't want to make any rash decisions, so I spent the next few weeks reconnecting with people in the industry, reading books, and clearing my mind. It was during this time that I had a conversation with an old friend from college, Mark. Mark had been a mentor of sorts, someone who always had a sharp perspective on business, and someone who wasn't afraid to tell me when I was making mistakes. We talked for hours that night, and by the end of our conversation, I realized something pivotal. I had been going about entrepreneurship all wrong. I had been so focused on the big picture, the end goal of scaling and selling, that I lost sight of the smaller steps, the building blocks of success. I had been so eager to be the next big thing that I forgot the importance of actually enjoying the process. That conversation shifted something in me. I realized that I needed to approach my next venture with a different mindset. I didn't need to build the next unicorn right away. I needed to take my time, learn from my mistakes, and focus on creating something sustainable. I needed to find joy in the journey. With that in mind, I started over. I didn't dive straight into another tech startup. Instead, I took on freelance work. I worked with small businesses to help them grow their online presence, and I took on consulting gigs for companies that needed help refining their strategies. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was work that allowed me to build back my confidence. Every time I helped a small business grow, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in a long time. It was rewarding in a way that building a startup hadn't been, and I slowly began to realize that I loved the process of helping others build their dreams, even if it wasn't my own company. Then, something unexpected happened. One of my freelance clients, a local coffee shop that had been struggling to stay afloat, offered me a partnership. They had seen the work I had done for them and wanted me to help them scale their business. The more we talked, The more I realized this wasn't just a chance to make money, it was an opportunity to build something from the ground up, just like I had always wanted, but without the pressure of trying to create something massive right out of the gate. This time, I could take my time, make smart decisions, and build something sustainable. I agreed to the partnership, and over the next few months, we grew the coffee shop into a local favorite. We didn't just focus on expanding the business, we focused on making the customer experience exceptional. We invested in the local community, hosting events and offering workshops. We connected with our customers in ways that made them feel like they were part of something bigger. By the time the first year was over, the business was thriving. We had expanded to a second location, and we were profitable. But most importantly, I had learned so much about what it really took to build a business, not just the hustle, but the importance of patience, of focusing on your customers, and of building a strong, positive team culture. That's when I realized entrepreneurship isn't just about creating the next big thing. It's about creating something that you believe in, something that matters, and finding fulfillment in the process. I might not have become the next tech mogul, but I had found something much more valuable, the joy of building something meaningful, one step at a time. Looking back, I can see now that the failure of my first startup was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It taught me more than any success ever could. And even though the road was long and hard, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Sometimes, failure is just the first step toward finding what you were really meant to do. I started my journey as an entrepreneur in a small, dusty corner of a coffee shop with just a laptop and an idea. My name is Alex, and while my friends were climbing the corporate ladder, I was navigating the steep, often slippery slope of starting a business. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, for the longest time, it wasn't even close to being profitable. But what it was a dream, one that I was determined to chase, even if it meant getting up at 4 a.m. every day for a year just to scrape together enough money to keep going. It all began about 5 years ago. I was working a dead-end job in marketing, one that paid the bills but never sparked joy. I spent my days in meetings that went nowhere, writing copy that no one cared about, and feeling like I was wasting my potential. But the idea came to me one night while scrolling through my phone. I had always been into fitness. Working out was the one thing that gave me peace, and I realized that the market for home fitness products was booming. There was just one problem. The fitness equipment I saw online was either ridiculously expensive, poorly made, or both. I knew there had to be a way to make affordable, high-quality fitness products that people would actually want to buy. I had no experience in product design, manufacturing, or e-commerce, but I did have something equally important, an insatiable desire to make it work. I spent the next few weeks doing research. I read every article I could find about creating a brand, sourcing materials, and setting up an online store. I learned the hard way that success doesn't come from simply having a great idea. It comes from execution, and execution requires a solid plan. But, of course, executing that plan came with a lot of obstacles. My first challenge was finding a manufacturer. I didn't have a ton of money to spend, so I had to look for suppliers who would work with small businesses. After countless emails and phone calls, I finally found a manufacturer willing to take a chance on me. I ordered a small batch of products, basic workout equipment like dumbbells, resistance bands, and kettlebells. By the time the products arrived, I had already set up an online store, but the process of building it was a nightmare. I had no background in web development, and every time I thought I figured something out, I'd hit another roadblock. The site would crash, payments wouldn't go through, and the product descriptions I wrote sounded like they were written by a robot. Yet, through all the frustration, I kept pushing forward. The desire to prove to myself that I could make this work kept me going. Finally, the day came when the products were ready to be sold. I launched my website with a mix of excitement and sheer terror. I had no audience. I had no email list. I had no social media following. But I had the internet, and I was determined to figure out how to use it. My first sale came 2 weeks after launching the site. It was a single kettlebell. I can't even describe the feeling of seeing that order confirmation pop up on my screen. I was ecstatic, but also terrified. This wasn't a victory. It was just the beginning. One sale wasn't going to pay the bills, and I still had no clue how to scale the business. For the next few months, I hustled. I posted on fitness forums. I emailed bloggers who wrote about health and fitness, asking them to review my products. I spent every spare moment learning about SEO, social media marketing, and how to optimize my product listings. Slowly but surely, the sales started to trickle in. But even as the business grew, it was still a constant struggle. There were countless setbacks. I had inventory problems. Some of my products broke in transit. I made deals with influencers who promised to promote my brand but never delivered. Worst of all, there were moments where I thought I had hit a wall. I remember one instance where a huge order of products got delayed by a month. The factory didn't tell me about the delay until after the products were supposed to ship. That month felt like an eternity. I thought I was done. I thought the dream was over. But I kept going. I learned to pivot, adapt, and most importantly, trust in my ability to solve problems. I started reaching out directly to customers who had negative experiences, offering them free replacements or refunds, and asking for feedback. That feedback was invaluable. It helped me improve the products and the customer experience. By the end of year one, I had turned a small profit. I wasn't rich, but I was making enough to cover the cost of running the business and reinvest in growing it. That's when I knew I was onto something. The momentum was building. In year two, I started experimenting with paid ads. I had no marketing budget, so I started small, with $5 a day on Facebook ads. The return on investment was minimal at first, but I kept tweaking the ads, testing different creatives, and analyzing the data. I learned more about my customers than I ever thought possible. Over time, my ad spend increased, and so did the sales. Slowly, I started building a loyal customer base. Word of mouth spread. My products were being recommended by fitness influencers, and more people were buying them. By year three, the business was no longer just a side hustle, it was my full-time job. I hired a small team to help with customer service, marketing, and fulfillment. I also expanded the product line, offering everything from yoga mats to foam rollers. The revenue was growing exponentially, but so were the challenges. Managing a team, scaling operations, and dealing with customer complaints were all new challenges that I hadn't anticipated. The biggest hurdle came in year four when a major competitor launched a line of similar products at a lower price. For a moment, I panicked. I feared the business I had worked so hard to build would crumble. But then I remembered why I started this journey in the first place. I wasn't trying to compete on price. I was trying to create a brand that people trusted. I doubled down on customer service, quality, and authenticity. I launched a loyalty program. I started offering free workout guides with every purchase. I created a community of fitness enthusiasts who genuinely believed in my products. Today, the company is thriving. We have a loyal customer base, an expanded product line, and we're breaking into international markets. We've hit a milestone I thought was impossible 5 years ago, 6 figures in revenue. But more than the money, what excites me the most is the knowledge that I built this from the ground up. I took something that started as an idea, a dream, and made it a reality. I'm not here to tell you that entrepreneurship is easy. Far from it. It's exhausting, painful, and often discouraging. But it's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. There will always be challenges. There will always be setbacks. But if you keep pushing forward, you'll eventually break through. The road is long, but it's worth it. I know because I've walked it. I was 26 years old, stuck in a corporate job I hated, and living paycheck to paycheck. The thought of working 40 hours a week for the next 40 years was soul-crushing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something bigger, but I had no idea what that something was. I had a degree in business administration, but I wasn't exactly using it in my entry-level office role. I'd spent months looking at entrepreneurship blogs, motivational videos, and trying to figure out how other people managed to make it. One night, scrolling mindlessly on my phone, I stumbled upon a Reddit post about dropshipping. The idea seemed simple enough. Find a product, create an online store, and make money selling it. But like many people, I was skeptical. The stories I read about it were either exaggerated or simply sounded too good to be true. No way it's that easy, I thought. There's got to be a catch. But the more I researched, the more the idea of creating something of my own started to seem possible. And with barely any money to spare, I figured, what do I have to lose? I immediately dove into learning about e-commerce and dropshipping. I watched hours of YouTube videos, read articles, and even joined a few Facebook groups. At first, everything felt overwhelming. The technical side of things, like setting up a website, dealing with suppliers, and handling customer service, made my head spin. I had no experience with marketing, so trying to figure out Facebook ads and Google Analytics felt like learning a foreign language. But I was determined to make it work. I convinced myself that if I could just get this one thing right, it would change everything. I decided to start small. I didn't have thousands of dollars to throw around on inventory or expensive ads, so I opted for a niche product, custom phone cases. Why? Because phone cases were cheap to source, light to ship, and there were thousands of unique designs out there. I didn't have to worry about creating a product myself or managing a complicated supply chain. I could find suppliers who would handle all of that for me. I created an online store through Shopify, using a free theme I found online. The website design was basic, and to be honest, it looked pretty unprofessional, but I didn't have the skills or money to do anything fancy. I used AliExpress to find suppliers who could ship the cases directly to my customers. The hardest part was figuring out how to set up my Facebook ads. I spent weeks testing different ad copy, images, and targeting. Some of my ads barely got any attention, and others got clicks, but no sales. I felt like I was throwing darts in the dark. After about a month of trial and error, something finally clicked. One of my Facebook ads started getting consistent traffic. I wasn't making a ton of sales, but the idea that people were actually visiting my site and showing interest in my products gave me a glimmer of hope. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business, scaling my ads slowly but surely. As I fine-tuned my ads, I learned more about how to target my ideal customer and what kind of messaging worked best. My sales began to grow, slowly at first, but they were growing. Fast forward to 6 months later, and I was making a few $1,000s a month in profit. It wasn't life-changing money yet, but it was enough to make me realize this was something I could do full-time. I quit my job and went all in. I hired a part-time VA to help with customer service and order fulfillment, and I outsourced the design work for new products. I kept pushing my ads, experimenting with new strategies, and listening to customer feedback. Sales picked up even more. I was working long hours, but it felt different. I was working for myself. There were moments of doubt, of course. There were nights when I thought about quitting, wondering if I had what it took to succeed in this space. But then, one day, I received a message from a customer who told me how much they loved their custom phone case. It wasn't a huge message, but it hit me differently than anything else. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money, it was about creating something people loved. That small realization changed everything. Over the next year, I expanded my product offerings. I started selling custom mugs, t-shirts, and even personalized home decor. My store grew, and so did my team. I brought on another person to help with marketing and a product designer who could create new designs for the products. By the end of the second year, I was making 6 figures in profit. I couldn't believe it. I went from living paycheck to paycheck in a job I hated to running a successful e-commerce business that gave me the freedom to live life on my own terms. But the road wasn't always smooth. I faced plenty of challenges along the way. There were months when sales dropped, when Facebook changed its ad algorithm, and when suppliers screwed up orders. I learned how to handle customer complaints, deal with refunds, and troubleshoot issues I never imagined I'd have to deal with. There were days when I was exhausted and questioning everything, but I kept pushing forward. I kept reminding myself why I started in the first place, to build something for myself. One of the most important lessons I learned in this journey is that entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. Success doesn't happen overnight. It requires persistence, patience, and a willingness to adapt. I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but each mistake was a valuable lesson that brought me closer to my goal. Today, I'm still running my e-commerce business, and it's more successful than I ever imagined. I've learned to delegate tasks, hire the right people, and continually innovate. I'm not just a business owner anymore. I'm a creator, a problem solver, and a lifelong learner. It hasn't been easy, but it has been incredibly rewarding. I've built something that's truly mine, and that's worth more than anything a corporate job could have ever offered me. To anyone out there considering taking the leap into entrepreneurship, my advice is simple: just start. You don't have to have it all figured out from day one. You don't need to know everything. You just need to take that first step, keep learning, and never give up. There will be tough days, and things won't always go as planned. But if you stay committed and keep pushing forward, you'll be amazed at what you can achieve. If I can go from a broke office worker to a successful entrepreneur, so can you. Don't let fear or doubt hold you back. The world needs your ideas. I was 22 when I first realized that my life needed a major change. I had just finished college and was living in a small apartment in a city where everything felt like a constant rush of noise and distraction. I'd graduated with a degree in marketing, which, to be honest, didn't excite me at all. The whole get a job, climb the ladder, get a house, settle down path that everyone around me seemed to be following wasn't my dream. One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, scrolling through Instagram, mindlessly watching influencers post about their luxurious lives. At first, I was jealous, thinking about how they had it all. Then, something clicked. Why was I sitting here, consuming their content, when I could be the one creating something? I had always been passionate about fashion and design, but had never taken it seriously enough to pursue it. I had a closet full of clothes I had made from scratch when I was younger, but I never considered it could be something more than a hobby. But in that moment, I realized it wasn't too late. I could create a brand, a business, and maybe even change my life. I started small. I didn't have any capital, so I had to get creative. I began by buying cheap fabric and upcycling old clothes I found at thrift stores. I would spend my nights sewing and experimenting with designs, teaching myself everything I could about patterns, cuts, and fashion trends. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a straight shot to success. In fact, there were times I felt ridiculous, like a kid playing dress up. But I believed in it. I believed in myself. The first real step was launching a small online store. I called it Urban Stitch. I designed a simple website myself, no fancy coding, just basic templates and a few hours of Googling. I took photos of the clothes I'd made, posted them online, and waited. Days turned into weeks, and not a single sale came through. I started feeling disheartened, but refused to quit. I spent hours on social media trying to promote my products, reaching out to bloggers, influencers, and anyone who would listen. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was learning fast. I invested in Facebook ads with a small budget, hoping for some exposure. It didn't work at first. My return was almost nothing, but I kept going. Then, something unexpected happened. One of the influencers I had been following on Instagram noticed my post about upcycled fashion. She reposted one of my photos, and that's when things started to shift. Her audience loved it. I had no idea how much power social media could have. Orders started flooding in. Slowly, but steadily, I was making sales. It wasn't a huge success, but it was enough to make me believe that I was onto something. With the small profits I made, I was able to reinvest in the business, buying better materials, expanding my product line, and even launching a small collection of custom designs. I hired a photographer to take professional photos, and I spent time researching my target audience and refining my brand identity. The business began to grow, and my online store started seeing more traffic. At the same time, I worked hard to improve my marketing strategies. I started to collaborate with influencers who shared my values of sustainability and ethical fashion. I created a blog on my website where I talked about sustainable fashion, the importance of upcycling, and how people could get involved. The content resonated with my audience, and it helped build a community around my brand. I was no longer just selling clothes. I was selling a lifestyle, a movement. But success didn't come easily. The journey was filled with ups and downs. I remember a particular month where my sales dropped dramatically. I had invested a lot of money into new fabric, and I didn't have the cash flow to cover my costs. I had to make some tough decisions. I considered quitting several times. The pressure was unbearable. I was living on a tight budget and working late into the night, trying to keep the business afloat. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered how far I had come and how much I had learned. I kept pushing forward. By the time I was 25, Urban Stitch was doing much better. I had expanded into offering accessories and was even working with a few well-known celebrities to create custom pieces. My brand was gaining recognition, and I was invited to showcase my designs at local fashion events. But, despite the progress, there was still a deep sense of uncertainty. The fashion industry was constantly changing, and I had to stay ahead of trends while keeping my authentic values intact. It was challenging, but I felt more driven than ever. Then, one day, I received an email that would change everything. A large fashion retailer had reached out to me about potentially partnering to feature my designs in their stores. At first, I thought it was a joke, but after a few rounds of negotiations, I realized it was real. I was terrified. I was still a small business, and the thought of mass production scared me. Would I be able to maintain the quality and ethos of my brand? I took the leap. We worked out a deal where I would maintain control over the designs and production, but they would help with distribution. It was a partnership that allowed me to scale my brand while keeping the values I had built from the ground up. In the first few months, I saw my sales explode. What started as a small side hustle was now a legitimate business with employees, warehouses, and an international customer base. Looking back, I can hardly believe how far I've come. The same kid who was stuck in a small apartment, scrolling through Instagram, dreaming of something more, is now running a successful fashion brand. I learned so much along the way, not just about business, but about resilience, creativity, and how important it is to take risks. I'm still learning and evolving. Every day presents new challenges, but I'm more committed than ever to making Urban Stitch a brand that stands for something. I'm not just selling clothes. I'm creating a movement towards sustainability and responsible fashion. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone thinking of starting their own business, it would be this: don't be afraid to start small, and don't quit when things get tough. The path to success isn't linear, and it's okay to make mistakes. What matters is that you keep going, learn from every experience, and stay true to your vision. So, to anyone out there feeling stuck, remember this: the best time to start is now. And when things get hard, just keep going. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.